Humans were just a myth until their warships broke the silence. HFY, sci-fi story. In the vast, unfathomable reaches of the galaxy, the species of the United Expanse held dominion. 1,000 worlds and trillions of beings, each one connected by an intricate web of trade, politics, and peace. The stars, once silent witnesses to the rise and fall of civilizations, hummed softly with the rhythms of life. Yet, for centuries, one thing was missing from this cosmic symphony: the humans. Legends of a species lost to time were whispered through the corridors of spacefaring empires. Humans were nothing but a myth, the elder species would say with a laugh, shaking their heads, their reputation for brutality, for their wars that had once ravaged their homeworld, was the stuff of ancient stories. The galaxy had long since moved on, leaving Earth and its people in the dust of history. No one had seen a human for over 2,000 years. Their disappearance had been a mystery, one that most had forgotten. That was, until the day the silence was shattered. It began with a ripple. At first, it was only a whisper, a strange signal that no one could trace, emanating from the forgotten reaches of the galaxy. The Expanse's most sophisticated ships, equipped with hyper-advanced AI and quantum sensors, couldn't identify the source. It wasn't a distress call, but a deep, echoing sound that reverberated through the vacuum. It was more than just a signal. It was an invitation, a challenge, the faintest tremor in the stillness of space. It wasn't until the flagship of the Terranx Confederacy, Screech of the Nebula, passed through the far edge of the galaxy that the full force of the event became apparent. On the edge of a barren star system, a massive object appeared, something no one had seen before. The object was a warship, but it wasn't like anything in the Confederacy's vast armory. It was massive, stretching over 5 miles in length, with jagged edges that seemed to pulse with energy. Its hull was an intricate latticework of materials no one could identify. It had been dormant for millennia, drifting silently until now. The Screech of the Nebula's sensors pinged wildly, but there was no official recognition, only the unmistakable sensation that something ancient, something powerful, was staring back. And then it moved. A single transmission shot across the void, cutting through the silence with the force of a comet. The message was simple, but its meaning was profound. This is humanity. We have returned. At first, the Terranx crew thought it was a trick. They had never heard of a human ship, and the legends had always been dismissed as fantasy. But then the reality set in. This was no illusion. The ship powered on, sending waves of electromagnetic interference that scrambled all conventional communications. Its weapons systems flared to life, and a low hum reverberated through the space surrounding it. It was an old warship, but not one the galaxy had ever seen before. Humanity had returned, and they were armed. Across the expanse, every species turned their gaze toward the unknown. What had once been a forgotten race had suddenly emerged from the shadows, and their warships were breaking the very silence of the galaxy. For centuries, the peaceful species of the Expanse had lived in harmony. They had not known conflict in generations. The strongest weapons in their fleets were designed for defense, not war. But now, they were forced to confront the unimaginable. The humans were back, and they were not coming for peace. The Expanse's council called an emergency summit. Leaders from the Clytherians, the Thrix, the Valjuan, and the Korans gathered together to discuss the threat. The ancient texts spoke of humanity's dark history, of their wars and their insatiable thirst for expansion. If those legends were true, the return of humans could mean the end of their civilization. Perhaps it's a mistake, the Clytherian ambassador suggested, trying to remain hopeful. Maybe they've evolved beyond their violent past. But no one believed that. No one could. The humans were here, and they were speaking in a language only war could understand. The first full engagement came days later, as the humans' warships, dozens of them, emerged from the dark reaches of the galaxy. They did not send a diplomatic envoy. They did not offer terms of peace. They didn't even ask for an audience. They sent a message, loud and clear: this is our galaxy now. In a flash, the Expanse's peace was shattered. The first human ship, a dreadnought named Ragnarok, fired its weapons on a Clytherian outpost. The weapon systems, which had been powered down for centuries, flared to life with devastating force, sending shockwaves that reached across light years. Entire cities were wiped from the map in an instant. The rest of the Expanse mobilized, but it was too late. The humans had arrived not with words, but with weapons old, terrifying, and far more advanced than anyone could have imagined. The human ships had been hidden, dormant for centuries, waiting for the moment to return. Now they had returned, not to ask for a seat at the table, but to stake their claim on the stars. Across the galaxy, the question echoed, how had they survived? How had humanity, a species thought extinct, managed to rebuild? The answer was as old as their history itself. Humanity had survived because it was a species defined by its ability to endure. War, destruction, and chaos were in their blood. When their world had burned, when their species had faltered, they did not surrender. They rebuilt, they adapted, and they came back, not with peace, but with vengeance. The Expanse had underestimated the myth of humanity. And now, the humans were no longer a myth, they were a force to be reckoned with. As the warships tore through the stars, the galaxy's long-held peace crumbled. The people of the Expanse had lived in harmony for too long. They had forgotten what it meant to fight for survival. But now, they would remember. Humanity had returned, and the silence they had broken was only the beginning. Humans were just a myth, until their warships broke the silence. HFY, Sci-Fi Story. Part 2, The Return of the Wolf. The Expanse was not ready for war. For centuries, its people had lived in the comfort of peace, lulled by the soft hum of shared prosperity. It had been so long since the last great conflict that the words invasion and terror were considered mere myths. But in the span of a single day, those myths turned into a brutal reality. The humans, after emerging from the silence, began to stake their claim in ways no one had anticipated. Their warships were like ghosts from the past, ominous and unstoppable. The Ragnarok was not alone. From the deep, forgotten regions of the galaxy, a fleet of ancient ships, all of them marked with symbols no one could understand, appeared. The humans had not just returned, they had returned in force. The leaders of the Expanse scrambled to react. Panic spread faster than the human ships. The once proud fleets of the Terranx Confederacy, the Valjuan Unity, and the Thrix Dominion all began to mobilize, their commanders meeting in secret conclaves to form an alliance, a desperate attempt to repel the human incursion. At the heart of this effort stood the Union flagship, a colossal cruiser that had been designed specifically for peacekeeping. It was meant to serve as a symbol of unity, but now, it was a tool of war. It was the only ship capable of holding off the human dreadnoughts, but even it was no match for the ancient might the humans brought with them. "What do we know about them?" asked General Croth of the Terranx. His words were heavy, laden with the stress of the situation. His species was renowned for their war strategies, but this was something beyond any strategy they had ever encountered. "I've studied the reports," replied Ambassador Lien of the Valjuan. She was the most familiar with human history, having studied their ancient texts extensively. The humans were notorious for their destructive capabilities. They fought wars with weapons that left entire planets in ruins. But their ships, these warships, they're different. These aren't just weapons, they're symbols of their power. It's clear they've been preparing for this moment for a long time. "Then we need to strike first," Croth growled, his voice sharp. "The longer we wait, the more of their ships we'll face. We cannot afford a prolonged conflict." Lien hesitated. "We don't know how many of them there are. There could be more, hidden out of our reach. We can't risk losing everything on an assumption." The conversation spiraled into more heated debates, each leader convinced that the humans were a threat that needed to be neutralized. But no matter how many plans they devised, the truth hung over them all like a specter. The humans had the initiative, and they had the numbers. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Ragnarok, Captain Juno Alara stood at the helm, watching as the galaxy stretched out before her. The Ragnarok was a ship like no other, a relic of humanity's past. Its hull was built to withstand not just the ravages of war but the tests of time. Juno had been born to this ship, raised within its steel walls. Her father had been one of the last commanders before the long silence, and her mother had been a scientist who had worked on the technology that powered the humans' warships. The warships had been dormant for centuries, buried in the depths of forgotten space, but they had been waiting for humanity to return, waiting for Juno. Her father's voice echoed in her mind as she observed the stars. "Never forget why we fight, Juno. We are not conquerors, we are survivors. But when survival is at stake, there's no room for mercy." The message was clear. Humanity had been thrust into the galaxy's darkest corners, abandoned and forgotten, but they had survived, and now, they would reclaim what was theirs. Status report, she ordered, her voice cold, calculated. Scanning the expanse, Captain, her first officer, Liera, replied, "We've located the fleet. Multiple species have mobilized. The Terranks, the Valjuan, the Thrix, they're all coming together. They're building a coalition to fight us." Juno didn't flinch. "Let them. It makes no difference. They will learn what happens when you forget the wolves of the galaxy." She turned to the communications officer. "Send the signal again. Let them hear it. Let the entire galaxy know who we are." A moment later, the voice of humanity filled the vacuum of space. A single message transmitted to every corner of the expanse. "This is humanity. We do not seek your approval. We do not care for your peace. We seek only our place among the stars." The message sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The species of the expanse had always prided themselves on their unity, their shared peace, but they had forgotten one fundamental truth: humanity was built not for peace, but for survival. In their quest for survival, they had honed their capacity for war, their capacity for destruction. It was not long before the first clash came. The Ragnarok and its sister ships descended upon a Valjuan defense station, decimating it within moments. The human warships cut through the station's defenses as if they were made of paper. The Valjuan, despite their technological prowess, were powerless in the face of humanity's overwhelming firepower. Reports of the battle reached the other fleets within hours. Entire fleets of Terranks warships attempted to engage the humans, only to find themselves outclassed and outmaneuvered. The human ships moved with precision and grace, their weapons incinerating any opposition in their path. The Expanse's armies, though vast, were unprepared for the unrelenting force of humanity. No one had ever thought to train for a war with a species that had fought and survived against its own extinction. No one had considered that the humans might return as an unstoppable force, forged through centuries of conflict and darkness. As the war raged, the galaxy began to change. The mighty fleets of the Expanse found themselves retreating, beaten back by the relentless march of humanity's warships. The humans, once a myth, now wielded the very fabric of the stars as their weapons. The truth was undeniable now. The silence had been broken, and humanity, the wolves of the galaxy, had returned to claim their place in the cosmos. To be continued. Humans were just a myth until their warships broke the silence. HFY, Sci-Fi Story. Part 3, The Wolves' Dominion. The tide of battle had turned. The fleets of the Expanse, once proud and unshakable, now found themselves on the defensive. Each day brought a new report of a fallen outpost, a broken defense station, or an annihilated fleet. The humans, who had once been forgotten, now controlled the edge of the galaxy. No longer were they the mythic, fractured species of ancient legend. They were the new power, and their rise seemed unstoppable. In the halls of the Union flagship, the Council of the Expanse convened once more, but this time their faces were grave, their bodies stiff with the weight of defeat. General Croth paced back and forth, his many eyes glinting with frustration. "We cannot keep retreating like this," he growled. "The humans have cut through us like a knife through paper. We need to strike back, or we will lose everything." Ambassador Lien, pale and worried, stood up. "We have tried everything: conventional warfare, covert operations, even diplomatic missions. Nothing works. They are too powerful, too advanced. We cannot win against them with force alone." Croth's lips curled into a sneer. "Then what do you suggest, Lien? Surrender? Give them everything?" "We may not have a choice," she said softly, her voice carrying a weight of reluctant acceptance. "The humans don't want to negotiate. They don't want peace. They came for something else. I've been studying their tactics, their culture. They don't believe in coexistence. They believe in dominance, and they're showing us exactly what that means." "Their warships are just the start," Lien continued, her eyes narrowing in thought. "The Ragnarok and its fleet, those ships are only a fraction of what they have. They've kept their true strength hidden. If we continue this war, it will only escalate. We must find another way." Croth stared at her for a long time, a deep rumble in his chest. "You think they'll listen to diplomacy?" Lien sighed, her shoulders slumping. "I don't know, but if we don't try, we will have no future." Meanwhile, deep within the heart of the human fleet, Captain Juno Alara stood at the helm of the Ragnarok. staring into the void. The stars glittered like scattered jewels, a reminder of what had been and what was now in their grasp. Her eyes flicked to the tactical display. A new transmission had come in, a message from the Expanse's council. They had requested an audience. They want to negotiate, Liera, her first officer, said, standing beside her. Juno's lips curled into a wry smile. Negotiate? After everything they've thrown at us? They think we're still interested in talks? Liera hesitated. It could be a trap. They might be looking for a way to sabotage us, or to find our weaknesses. Juno turned to face her. It doesn't matter. We've won. They know we've won. If they want to beg for mercy, fine, we'll listen. But make no mistake, they're not the ones in control anymore. We are. The meeting was arranged at a neutral station, far from the front lines of the war. A small delegation from the Expanse's council arrived, their ships escorted by human warships that loomed ominously in the distance. On board the station, General Croth and Ambassador Lien prepared themselves for what they hoped would be a turning point in the conflict. They entered the conference room with a sense of trepidation. Across from them, seated in a chair that seemed far too large for her, was Captain Juno Ilara. Her gaze was unflinching, her posture relaxed as if this were simply another routine meeting, not the fate of an entire galaxy at stake. Welcome, Juno said with a sharp smile. I trust the journey was pleasant? Croth stood tall, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. Enough games, Captain. We didn't come here to exchange pleasantries. Juno leaned forward, her smile widening. And yet here we are. Do you know why you're here? Lien stepped forward, trying to mask the tension in her voice. We've come to discuss terms. Humanity's destruction of our outposts, our fleets, our colonies. It's been relentless. But we're asking for peace. We seek to stop this war before it destroys both our peoples. Juno's fingers tapped lightly on the armrest of her chair. Peace? Huh? After everything you've done? The countless deaths? The countless assaults? I don't think you understand how we humans work. We don't stop because it's convenient. We don't stop because someone asks us to. We stop when we decide it's done. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. You've already lost, Juno continued, her voice calm and cold. You should have known this the moment we revealed ourselves. Humans don't ask for permission. We take. We conquer. And once we've made a place for ourselves in the stars, we never give it up. Croth clenched his fists, his patience worn thin. You think you can take the entire galaxy? You are outnumbered, outgunned, and isolated in the farthest reaches of space. Juno's eyes sparkled with a dark fire. That's where you're wrong. We've been here longer than you've realized. You call it isolation. We call it preparation. We've had time to learn, to grow stronger. And now, we're not asking for a place. We're claiming it. You can either accept it or continue fighting. But make no mistake, the end is coming. It's just a matter of time. Lien's voice trembled as she spoke. We don't want more death. We've already lost so much. Juno's expression softened, just for a moment. You should have thought of that before you ignored us. Humanity doesn't forget easily, and we don't forgive. We never forget who leaves us to die. The negotiations ended as they had begun, with no agreement, no resolution. The Expanse's leaders were left in a stunned silence as the humans stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. It was clear that their plea for peace had been rejected. Leave, Juno said, standing, and tell your people the truth. We are here to stay. This galaxy belongs to humanity now. As Croth and Lien exited the room, they exchanged a glance, knowing that their only option now was to face the unrelenting march of humanity's power. They had lost this war before it even began. The war raged on, but the fate of the Expanse was sealed. Humanity, once a legend, was now the dominant force in the galaxy. The wolves had claimed the stars, and no one could stop them. To be continued. Humans were just a myth until their warships broke the silence. HFY, Sci-Fi Story. Part 4, The Fall of the Expanse. The days that followed the failed peace talks were tense, like a star on the brink of supernova. The war, once seen as a threat, had become an inevitability. The Expanse's fleets, desperate and broken, continued to retreat into the farthest corners of their territory, but they were met at every turn by the relentless march of humanity's warships. The human fleet, once a mystery, had become the harbinger of doom for the Expanse's greatest empires. Their warships, each one an ancient relic of a time long past, tore through the defenses of the Valjuan, the Terranks, the Thrix, and every other species that had once ruled the stars. The humans didn't just conquer, they annihilated. And each victory made them stronger, their resolve more absolute. The expanse was falling. The galaxy had been waiting for something like this, something primal and unstoppable, and now it had arrived. On the Ragnarok, Captain Juno Alara stood before a holographic map of the galaxy, her fingers hovering over the glowing constellations. The war was nearly over. The fleets that had once posed a threat to humanity were dwindling, and the remnants of the Expanse's governments were cowering, their capitulation looming. General Reyes, Juno called, her voice echoing in the quiet of the war room. A tall, battle-worn officer approached, his expression grim. How are the operations proceeding? Reyes nodded toward the map. We've disabled most of the major fleets. The remaining outposts are scattered. A few skirmishes left, but nothing that will pose any real challenge. The Expanse's last defense is falling apart. Juno tapped her chin thoughtfully. They're broken, but they're not done yet. We need to make sure they understand there's no escape. This isn't just about winning a war. It's about erasing any chance they have to rise again. Reyes looked at her, then back at the map. Are we going to give them the final blow? Not just yet, Juno replied, her eyes gleaming with a cold fire. I want them to feel it. The final surrender isn't just about a fleet retreating or a planet falling. It's about breaking them. They need to know they have nothing left to lose before they yield. Far from the human fleet, in the heart of the Expanse, the surviving leaders of the galaxy's once great species had gathered in secret. There was no more denying the truth, they were losing. One by one, their strongest fleets had been shattered. The valiant resistance they had fought to maintain was crumbling like a sandcastle against the tide. General Croth of the Terranks stood before the council, his many eyes narrowed in defeat. We can't keep running. We can't keep hiding. The humans have shown us that. But neither can we surrender entirely. If we do, it will mean the end of everything we've fought for. Ambassador Lien, whose once hopeful face was now shadowed by despair, spoke next. The humans are not like us. They don't negotiate. They don't forgive. There is no longer any room for diplomacy. But we can't just roll over and let them take everything. There must be another way, a way to survive. Croth's voice was thick with frustration. If survival means bending the knee to the humans, then it is a hollow victory. I refuse to let my people be enslaved. A voice from the shadows spoke, cold and calculated. You don't have to. The council turned to see an older figure step into the light. It was an emissary from the Valjuan, a species that had always valued intelligence over brute strength. You're not going to like what I suggest, he continued, his voice clipped, but it's the only way we can survive this. What do you mean? Croth demanded, his tone sharp. The emissary held up a small device, a communication relay. We have a way to strike back, but it will cost us everything. If we use this, we might not win, but we can make them bleed. We can make them regret ever waking up from their long slumber. The tension in the room was palpable. What was he suggesting? This device contains coordinates to a weapon, one humanity has never encountered. It's been lost to time, but we've found it. If we activate it, we can create a supernova, a blast so powerful it would decimate not just their fleet, but their core worlds as well. The room fell silent. You're suggesting we destroy them? Lien's voice trembled, both in horror and wonder. Yes, the emissary answered coldly, but in doing so, we may destroy ourselves as well. This weapon will take everything from us, our people, our homes. But if we don't do something, if we don't make them feel the weight of their arrogance, there will be nothing left for us to defend. Croth gripped his weapons tightly, his mind racing. Is there another choice? The emissary's gaze was unyielding. We fight, or we perish. The humans have already written our fates. We can either bow to them, or we can burn the galaxy with them. Back on the Ragnarok, Juno was standing at the observation deck, staring at the stars. A message had just arrived, an encrypted transmission from the remnants of the Expanse's council. I hope they've finally come to their senses, she muttered under her breath. Liera approached, reading the transmission over her shoulder. They're not surrendering, Captain. They're preparing something. Juno's eyes narrowed. A final strike. Perhaps? A desperate attack to stall the inevitable? They're in the wrong position to win, but we can't let our guard down. We've already won, Liera replied, the certainty in her voice matching the strength in her captain's. Juno turned away from the stars. No one wins a war until it's finished. Keep your eyes open. If they think they have something up their sleeve, we'll see what it is soon enough. The next few hours were a blur of activity, unknown to Juno and her fleet. The Expanse's leaders were preparing to make a final stand. They were desperate, but they were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice if it meant taking humanity down with them. The weapon was activated. A brilliant flash of energy tore through space as the Expanse's final act of defiance was unleashed. The Ragnarok's sensors lit up. An unknown force had just exploded with unimaginable power. The galaxy trembled. Juno's eyes went wide as she saw the data on her screen. What the hell? But it was too late. The explosion was beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. A wave of energy radiated outward, destabilizing star systems, causing massive gravitational anomalies. The blast was on a scale that threatened to tear the very fabric of the Expanse apart. But the humans were not unscathed. For the first time, humanity's pride, their triumph, was shaken. The battle was not over, but as the Expanse burned, and as the final remnants of their resistance crumbled, one thing was clear. The galaxy had not been conquered yet. It had been changed forever. To be continued. Humans were just a myth, until their warships broke the silence. HFY, Sci-Fi Story. Part 5, The Reckoning. The aftermath of the Expanse's final gambit had shaken even the hardened hearts aboard the Ragnarok. A massive energy wave had torn through the galaxy like a giant hand sweeping the stars away, destabilizing entire sectors, ripping through both Expanse and human territories alike. But it wasn't the blast itself that had made Juno Alara pause, it was what had come in its wake. Humanity's warships had weathered the shockwaves, but not without cost. Shields flickered, hulls groaned, and the once unstoppable Ragnarok had lost a third of its power. Worse still, a cascading ripple of chaos had been triggered in the galaxy's heart, an anomaly that was disrupting communication, navigation, and even gravity fields in some sectors. The Expanse had unleashed a weapon of unimaginable magnitude, one that humanity was not prepared for. Juno stood at the war room's center, her face a mixture of disbelief and determination. Liera, report. Her first officer's face was drawn tight with tension. It's not just the energy wave, Captain. There are gravitational shifts appearing in sectors we haven't even reached yet. Unknown forces at play. It's not just destabilizing the Expanse. It's affecting the entire galaxy. What do you mean, affecting the galaxy? Juno demanded, her voice hard. Liera pointed to the tactical screen. These anomalies, they're more than just random disturbances. They're spreading. It's like something's waking up. Like the Expanse's last-ditch weapon didn't just hit us, but triggered something dormant in space itself. Juno's gaze hardened. A trap, she muttered. This entire war, it was never about just us and them. There's something else at play. Meanwhile, on the fringe of the galaxy, in a forgotten corner of space, the last of the Expanse's shattered fleets had gathered, now refugees in their own land. General Croth stood at the helm of the Invictus, the Terranx's final flagship, staring at the swirling cosmic anomalies that seemed to twist and bend time itself. We've lost, Croth murmured, more to himself than anyone else. The image of his people, his warriors, fading into obscurity was a bitter reality he couldn't escape. Ambassador Lien approached, her voice somber. But not all is lost. We did what we had to do. The Expanse may be gone, but we gave humanity a reckoning, a challenge they weren't prepared for. Croth turned to face her, a challenge they'll adapt to, like they always do. I've seen what they're capable of. This galaxy will bend to their will. It always has. Lien shook her head. No. The weapon we unleashed, it's changed everything. If we can still find a way to work together, if we can survive long enough to understand what it's doing to the galaxy, maybe there's still hope. Croth eyed her warily. Hope? After everything? There's only one thing left for us to do. Lien, survive. And even that may be impossible. Back aboard the Ragnarok, the gravity anomalies had reached a fever pitch. Juno's gaze was fixed on the swirling vortexes that were beginning to form at the edges of the Expanse. Something massive, something alive, was stirring in the void. Captain, you need to see this, Liera called urgently. Juno stepped over to the tactical station, where the image of a massive structure filled the screen, an ancient artifact hidden deep within the heart of the galaxy. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered, a colossal, obsidian pyramid floating in the heart of a shattered star system, the remnants of what appeared to be a long-dead civilization. "We've never seen anything like it," Liara continued. It wasn't in any of the databases. No records, no mention." Juno frowned, narrowing her eyes at the image. That structure. It wasn't part of the Expanse's weapon. It must be connected to whatever triggered the anomaly. "We need to investigate it," Liara said, a hint of caution in her voice. "This could be what's causing the gravitational fluctuations. If it's tied to the weapon the Expanse used, we need to know what we're dealing with before it destabilizes more sectors." Juno stood still for a long moment, her mind racing. The Expanse had thrown everything they had at humanity, and yet, as she looked out into the void, she realized it wasn't just about vengeance. It was about something far more dangerous. "Prepare a team," she ordered. "We're going in." Hours later, the Ragnarok was hurtling toward the pyramid-like structure, and the crew felt the ship's sensors pulsing with every passing moment, as though the very fabric of reality was stretching and warping around them. Juno stood before the observation window, her hands clasped behind her back. "What is this place?" she muttered. The ancient structure loomed closer, its dark surface glistening with a strange, otherworldly sheen. As the ship closed the distance, something shifted within the pyramid, a faint hum, almost imperceptible at first, like a heartbeat. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently, the sensors flared red, and alarms went off. "Captain," Liara shouted, "we're being pulled in. Something's drawing us in." "Activate shields," Juno barked, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "Hold us steady." The Ragnarok fought against an unseen force that tugged at them like a gravity well. It was as though the pyramid had opened some kind of cosmic rift, and they were helpless to avoid its pull. "Shields holding, for now," the engineer reported, though the strain in his voice betrayed the severity of the situation. The hum grew louder, more intense, as if the pyramid was waking up. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything went silent. The ship stilled, the hum vanished, and the pyramid, its massive form now fully visible, seemed to pulse with an eerie light, as if it were aware of the human's presence. Juno's voice was low, filled with awe and uncertainty. "Get me a scan of that structure. I need to know what we're dealing with." As the scans began, the data came through garbled and incomplete, but one thing was clear: the pyramid wasn't just a relic. It was a weapon, and it had been dormant for eons. But now, it was alive again. "Captain," Liara said quietly, "whatever this thing is, it's not of the Expanse. It's older, far older, and if it's connected to the anomaly, it might just be the key to everything." Juno's eyes widened with realization. "The weapon, this isn't over. It's just begun." The galaxy was shifting again, the balance of power teetering on the edge of something far more dangerous than anything humanity or the Expanse had ever anticipated. The dormant forces of the galaxy were stirring, and the weapon that had been unleashed was only the beginning. What had once been a conflict between two powers now seemed like a small part of a far grander, more ancient struggle, and Juno Ilara, captain of the Ragnarok, realized that humanity's battle for survival was just a prelude to something far darker. To be continued. Humans were just a myth until their warships broke the silence. HFY, Sci-Fi Story, Part 6, The Awakening. The pyramid was more than just an ancient structure, it was a time-worn prison, a place where a primordial power had been sealed away eons ago. As the Ragnarok lingered in orbit, the ship's systems struggled against the unnerving energy emanating from the pyramid, pulsing like a heartbeat in the vast silence of space. Juno Ilara stood at the helm, her gaze fixed on the now glowing monolith, the strange hum still reverberating through the ship's hull. The map of the galaxy before her had changed. No longer were the gravitational anomalies simply erratic bursts. They had stabilized into a clear, predictable pattern. The pyramid was part of something much larger, far older than any of the species in the galaxy could understand. "Liara, what's the status on those scans?" Juno asked, her voice low, filled with suspicion and awe. Liara was hunched over the terminal, fingers flying over the controls, her brow furrowed. "The scans are inconclusive, Captain. There's no material or energy signature like anything we've encountered before. It's like the pyramid is disrupting the way our sensors operate." Juno didn't take her eyes off the pyramid. The strange energy seemed to warp the very air around it, creating ripples in space itself. It was as though the laws of the universe didn't apply in its immediate vicinity. Yet, she could feel the weight of its power, immense and ancient, and for the first time, Juno felt something she hadn't in years, a flicker of fear. "We're not going to just sit here and wait," Juno said. "Prep a team. We're going in." Liara met her captain's gaze, her expression tense. "Captain, we don't know what we're dealing with. The risks." "I know the risks," Juno interrupted, her voice hardening. "But if we don't find out what this is, we might not have a galaxy left to defend." The Ragnarok's landing shuttle descended slowly toward the pyramid's surface, the ship's engines humming with a low, ominous pitch. The structure, as black as a starless night, seemed to grow larger the closer they got, its surface etched with strange, geometric patterns that glowed faintly, pulsing with an unsettling rhythm. As the shuttle's hatch opened, Juno, Liara, and a small team of highly trained soldiers stepped out, their boots sinking slightly into the dust of the ancient world. The air was thick with static, and every movement seemed to send a ripple through the atmosphere. The pyramid towered over them, its top lost in the shadows. Juno's heart raced, though she masked it with stoic determination. This was no mere artifact, it was a beacon, a signal, perhaps even the key to everything. "Stay sharp," Juno ordered. "This place, it's alive." They approached the base of the pyramid cautiously. The patterns on the walls began to glow brighter the closer they got, and when they reached the entrance, a wide, jagged opening, shaped like a jagged mouth, it was as if the structure itself was waiting for them. "Do you see that?" Liara murmured, pointing to the floor of the chamber they entered. It was covered in intricate, almost organic engravings that shifted as they moved, as if reacting to their presence. The walls hummed louder, a sound that was felt as much as it was heard. "It's like it's aware," Juno said. She stepped forward, feeling the strange force coil around her. A push, a pull, something alive. Then, with a groan of ancient machinery, the pyramid's interior lit up with pulsing light, and the ground beneath them rumbled. A massive door at the far end of the chamber slowly began to open. "Get ready," Juno warned. The door revealed a room beyond, vast, dark, and filled with the remnants of long-forgotten technology. In the center stood a giant, crystalline object, radiating an intense, unearthly glow. It was a core, a power source of unimaginable proportions. Liara's voice was breathless as she whispered, "What is that? What is this place?" Before Juno could answer, a voice, old, ancient, yet unmistakably clear, boomed in the air, reverberating in the chamber. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once, as though the very walls had spoken it into existence. "You are trespassers." Juno spun, hand flying to her sidearm, but it felt useless. The voice didn't come from a being, it came from the pyramid itself. "You have awakened us, you have disturbed our slumber, and for this, you will pay." Liara staggered back, her hand gripping Juno's arm. "This is not a weapon," she said, her voice strained. This is something else. It's not just an artifact, it's..." Before she could finish, the pyramid's walls shifted, and a crackling energy surged through the room. The crystal at its center began to pulse violently, and the ground trembled. Juno's instincts kicked in. "Fall back. We need to get out of here, now." The team turned, but the entrance had vanished. The walls around them were shifting, warping, as though the pyramid itself had reformed into a new, deadly shape. The voice came again, this time colder, more menacing. "You are not the first to awaken us, and you will not be the last. But your kind, humanity, is not worthy of the power you have disturbed. The stars themselves will burn as you burn. The galaxy will collapse under the weight of your recklessness." Suddenly, the crystal at the center of the room flared with blinding light, and a wave of energy erupted outward. The shockwave hit like a physical blow, throwing Juno and her team off their feet, sending them crashing to the ground. The air around them shimmered as reality itself seemed to twist, bending and reshaping in ways that defied comprehension. Juno's head swam, her vision blurry as the pyramid's power grew unbearable. "Captain," Liara gasped, struggling to her feet. It's a catalyst. It's activating something." Juno forced herself up, barely able to stay on her feet as the entire room seemed to collapse inward, the walls folding into themselves, the air warping, the energy surging, the pyramid was alive, and it was now focused entirely on them. Liera, we need to get out, now, Juno shouted, but even as she reached for the comms to order a retreat, she felt the air around her freeze. Time itself seemed to slow. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the energy stopped, the light dimmed, the walls stopped shifting, the pyramid's hum became almost a whisper. You will face the consequences of your actions, humanity. This galaxy is not yours to command, but you will feel the weight of the past, as it crushes you. The ground shook one last time, and then all was still. Juno's breath came in ragged gasps as she looked around at her team. We're leaving, now. Back aboard the Ragnarok, the ship's sensors were still reeling from the shockwave that had emanated from the pyramid. Liera was at the comms, trying to contact the rest of the fleet, but every attempt was met with static. Juno paced in front of the tactical station, her mind racing. The voice, the power, it was clear now. The Expanse had unleashed something far beyond their understanding. They had awoken not just an ancient weapon, but a force that could reshape the entire galaxy. As the ship lifted away from the pyramid, Juno couldn't shake the feeling that they had not just discovered something ancient, but had reawakened something far more terrifying than the Expanse had ever been. The galaxy wasn't just changing, it was being rewritten. To be continued.